You sit there wondering why the door you closed keeps swinging open again. Why the figure you thought you banished from your life walks once more across the threshold of your mind. You tell yourself you are finished with them. You weave arguments to prove it. You recite the injuries like a litany, and yet a force below the level of your ordinary will beckons them back. This is not a mere failure of resolve. It is a symptom of something older, deeper, and far more mysterious than the conscious mind wishes to admit. For in the labyrinth of your psyche, every person you have loved and hated is not just flesh and bone, but also symbol and archetype. And the psyche does not release its symbols until they have yielded their meaning. That is why they return, or rather, why you return to them. When you fall under the sway of such a recurring figure, you are often dealing with what I have called a complex. A complex is not simply a cluster of memories. It is a living knot in the unconscious, charged with its own will and intent, like a minor personality dwelling within you. When this complex is touched, when its hidden wound is pressed, it rises with a vitality that can overwhelm your conscious decision. And because these complexes are often rooted in formative relationships, the mother, the father, the one who first mirrored your soul, they carry with them a numinous energy, an aura of inevitability. You are drawn back as the moth is drawn to the flame, even knowing the heat will scald. In the language of myth, these returning figures are messengers of the underworld. They come to remind you of a pact you made long before you were able to speak. Perhaps you learned that love is conditional, that attention must be earned by self-sacrifice, that to be seen you must first be wounded. Such lessons, learned in the fragile soil of childhood, sink into the archetypal layers of the psyche. And so when you meet someone who embodies the same pattern, it is not only attraction or habit at work, it is the ancient god of your inner pantheon calling you to repeat the old ritual, hoping perhaps that this time the rite will be completed, the offering accepted, and the cycle broken. Yet the unconscious is indifferent to your comfort. It will lure you again and again into the same labyrinth until you have walked its full measure. You may think you can escape by closing your heart, by vanishing into work or distraction, but the psyche does not forget its unfinished business. In dreams, the face will appear. In idle moments, the thought will return, tinged with longing or bitterness. And before you know it, you are standing once more at the door, hand upon the handle. Here, most people grow ashamed. They accuse themselves of weakness, of being unable to move on. But this is the wrong language. You are not weak. You are in the grip of a psychic necessity. What is required is not moral condemnation, but conscious engagement. Consider the dreamer who finds themselves in a recurring dreamscape, the same house, the same corridors, the same locked door at the end of the hall. In waking life, this house might correspond to an unresolved chapter, a relationship that refuses to stay in the past. Each time you re-enter the dynamic with that person, you are walking those corridors again. If you flee too soon, the door remains locked, the dream repeats The figure returns, but if you endure the encounter, if you stay in the moment long enough to see what lies beyond that door, something changes. The psyche releases its hold, and the compulsion begins to dissolve. You must understand, the person in question is not the true source of your captivity. They are but the visible tip of an invisible formation. The true captor is the image you carry inside, an image woven from your earliest bonds, shaped by the archetype of the other as it first appeared in your life. This is why, when they leave, you find someone else who plays the same role. The actors change, the script remains. You are not addicted to them. You are bound to the pattern, and the pattern is older than you. In this way, to let someone back in is often to attempt unconsciously a completion of the story. You may not articulate it, but some part of you hopes that this time they will understand. This time they will love you without condition. This time the ending will be different. This hope is not foolish. It is archetypal. It is the longing of the inner child to be seen in their wholeness. But because you place the task upon the same type of person who first wounded you, the probability of repetition is high. The psyche does not heal by avoiding the wound, but by entering it with awareness. Here lies the great challenge: to meet the returning figure not with blind surrender, nor with defensive exile, but with the eyes of one who is willing to see the symbolic drama for what it is. You must be able to stand in their presence and feel the old currents rise. And instead of being swept away, you observe them. You note the tightening in the chest, the thrill of recognition, the dread of loss. These sensations are the language of the complex, and in that moment you are no longer the child caught in its grip, but the adult witness who can choose a new response. But beware, the ego often deceives itself here. It believes that by analyzing the pattern once or twice, it has mastered it. Yet the unconscious is deep, and its roots extend beyond personal memory into the collective. When an archetype is active, it can possess you. The Greeks called this being seized by a god. When Aphrodite or Dionysus enters, you do not negotiate. You are carried. And so, if you find yourself letting them back in once more, do not imagine that you have failed. Rather, recognize that the God has claimed you again, and that your task is to remain conscious while in its grasp. You might ask, why does the psyche work this way? Why not simply give me the insight and free me from the cycle? Because knowledge without transformation is sterile. The unconscious insists upon embodiment. It requires that the insight be lived, that the pattern be met in the blood and nerves, not merely in the intellect. This is why you are placed back in the field of battle. The very repetition you despise is the alchemical vessel in which change can occur. Each return is an opportunity to react differently, to speak the unsaid, to refuse the bargain, to love without self-erasure. And yet, I will not deceive you. This process is painful. It will strip from you the illusions you have built around love and identity. You will have to see that part of you which has colluded with your own captivity. The shadow is not only the rage and resentment you carry toward them, it is also the part of you that needs them to play their role, so you can remain who you believe yourself to be. This is perhaps the most bitter truth, that you have kept the door ajar, because their presence confirms an old story you have been unwilling to outgrow. You will notice that when they reappear, there's a strange merging of time. The present moment collapses into the past, and you are again the younger self who first learned to bend, to silence your own needs, to read the weather of another's mood like a survival skill. This temporal collapse is a signature of an activated complex. It steals you from the here and now and imprisons you in what I call psychological time, a loop where the old drama plays as if no years have passed. You may have built a new life, achieved a measure of strength, but when the archetypal figure steps back onto the stage, all that growth can feel suddenly distant, as though you are dreaming it. In truth, the growth is not gone. It is merely eclipsed by the shadow that has risen. This is why you cannot reason yourself free. Logic operates in chronological time. The unconscious operates in mythic time. And in mythic time, the past is always present. The dead always walk. The child you were still waits to be found. In this realm, the person who hurt you is not only themselves, they are the stand-in for the unfinished rite. The guardian at the threshold of your individuation. They hold in their hand the key you believe will unlock your sense of wholeness, and so you keep approaching, hoping to earn it. But here is the twist. The key they hold is not real. The true key lies in the hand of the one who is approaching you. In my work with dreams, I've seen countless variations of this theme. A dreamer returns again and again to the same place, often to a figure who refuses them entry or demands something impossible. These figures are not random. They are manifestations of the psyche's attempt to reconcile a split, a division between who you are and who you had to be to survive. The returning person in your waking life is a living dream symbol, an outer embodiment of the inner gatekeeper. And so when you let them back in, you are not merely resuming a relationship, you are re-entering the psychic space where the split first occurred. Some would say, then the answer is to cut them off forever. But such an act, if done without inner integration, simply drives the figure deeper into the unconscious, where it may reappear in disguised forms, a new lover, a friend, a mentor, even an enemy, each wearing a mask, but each serving the same archetypal function. The psyche is relentless in its pursuit of wholeness. You cannot outdistance it by changing the outer scenery. You must address the root, and this root is rarely pretty. It is tangled in the soil of your earliest dependencies, in the primal fear of abandonment, in the longing to be known without judgment. To face it is to sit in the fire of your own need without trying to quench it by another's approval. It is to feel the hunger without running to the old banquet that always leaves you starving. It is to acknowledge that the love you seek from them is, in truth, the love you have withheld from yourself. And here, the ego often rebels, for it would rather chase an impossible other than bear the responsibility of becoming the one who meets their own soul. But this is the path in the alchemical tradition. The substance must endure repeated exposure to the flame before the dross is burned away. Each return of this person is a stoking of that flame. You are not meant to glorify the fire, nor to curse it. but to remain in it until what is false falls away. Sometimes the same soul will circle through your life many times, not because you are fated to be together in the romantic sense, but because they are the precise catalyst your unconscious selected for your transformation. When you can meet them without collapsing into the old role, when you can love them without surrendering your center, when their approval or rejection no longer defines you, the pattern will lose its hold. Do not mistake this liberation for coldness. Detachment in the Jungian sense is not indifference. It is the freedom to engage without possession, to give without self-erasure, to remain present without being consumed. Only when you have achieved this inner stance can you see the other clearly, without the haze of projection. And here lies another shock. When the projection is withdrawn, the person may appear smaller, less luminous, perhaps even ordinary. The God you saw in them fades, and you see the human being with their limitations and wounds. For some, this is a disappointment. For others, it is the beginning of true relationship. Projection is a double-edged sword. It blinds us, yet it is also the means by which we come to know what is within us. Without projection, we would never fall in love, never feel the enchantment that draws us into the deep work of the soul. The danger is not in projecting, but in refusing to reclaim the projection when the time comes. To keep them on the pedestal is to keep yourself in the dust, and so when they return and you feel the old light flare, ask yourself, is this light truly in them? Or is it the reflection of my own undiscovered fire? If it is mine, then let me turn toward it within. In this way, the cycle becomes a teacher rather than a jailer. Each encounter offers you a chance to see more clearly where you are still bound, where the child still cries for recognition, where the shadow still whispers its bargains. If you can stay conscious through the surge, the rush of reunion, the comfort of the familiar, you can begin to respond from the whole self rather than the wounded fragment. And then, whether you let them in or keep them at the threshold, you do so from a place of choice rather than compulsion. I must tell you, the work of individuation is not about becoming untouchable. It is about becoming permeable to truth. To be touched deeply is human. To be governed by what touches you is bondage. The one who keeps returning is not merely testing your boundaries, they are testing your capacity to remain yourself in the presence of the archetype that once ruled you. If you can endure this without falling back into the old persona, you have stepped onto the path that leads out of the labyrinth. There is a particular kind of return that is not merely the repetition of an old relationship, but a reenactment of a primordial drama between the inner masculine and feminine, what I've called the Anima and animus, when the figure who keeps reappearing in your life stirs not only longing, but also a profound sense of destiny, when they seem to hold the very key to your sense of being alive, you are likely dealing with a projection of this inner counterpart. The anima or animus is not simply an image of the opposite sex within, it is the bridge to the unconscious itself. When it is projected outward, the other person becomes the doorway to your own depths. And this is why letting them back in feels like more than a personal choice. It feels like answering a summons from the soul. But the soul does not call you into safety. The anima, in her light aspect, seduces you toward beauty, feeling and connection, while in her dark aspect she draws you into obsession, abandonment and despair. The animus, in his light form, gives courage, clarity and purpose, but in his shadow form he tyrannizes, criticizes and isolates. When you project these inner powers onto a person, you are effectively handing them the steering wheel to your psychic life. You feel both exalted and endangered in their presence, as if you are walking the fine line between heaven and ruin, and in a way, the task is not to destroy the bond, but to withdraw the God from the mortal, to take back into yourself what you have located in them. This withdrawal does not happen by decree. You cannot simply say, I will stop projecting and expect the magic to vanish. The projection must be lived, suffered, and seen through. You must endure the intoxication until you recognize that the wine you are drinking was distilled in your own cellar. Only then can you taste it without needing them to pour it. This is why the same person may vanish from your life once the projection is withdrawn, or why you may see them with new eyes no longer as the sun and moon of your existence, but as another traveler with their own wounds and their own journey. Yet the shadow resists this work. The shadow is that part of you that fears wholeness, because wholeness will strip away the familiar roles, the victim, the savior, the martyr, the eternal child. The shadow clings to the pattern because the pattern gives it a stage on which to act out its script. Letting the person back in keeps the play running. To close the curtain would mean facing the emptiness that follows. And emptiness is terrifying to the ego. It feels like death, but in the language of the psyche, this is the nigredo, the blackening, the necessary stage in alchemy when all that is false must decompose so that the gold can emerge. And so you will notice the returning person often appears at moments of transition when an old identity is crumbling. When the future is uncertain, they come like an echo from the past, offering you a return to the known, even if the known has been painful. To let them back in at such moments is to seek shelter in the familiar, even as it keeps you from stepping fully into the unknown. The unconscious is cunning here. It does not simply tempt you back to comfort. It tests your readiness to face the void. Will you choose the pattern suffering over the blank page? Will you choose the known chains over the uncharted freedom? Dreams can illuminate this choice. Many have dreamed of walking along a dark shore, seeing a figure beckoning from a small lit cabin. Inside is warmth, familiarity, even love, but the air is stale. The walls close in, and the sea beyond is calling. This is the dream image of the choice to let them back in versus stepping into your own future. The cabin is safe, but it is too small for the soul you are becoming. The sea is vast, but it demands courage and solitude. In waking life, the decision may not feel so stark, yet the same archetypal forces are at play. The alchemical texts speak of the conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites, as the goal of the work. Many mistake the returning person for the literal partner, in this union, but the true conjunctio is within the reconciliation of the conscious and unconscious, the masculine and feminine, the persona and shadow. When you keep letting them back in without this inner union, you are attempting the conjunctio in the outer world prematurely. The psyche will then use the relationship to force you inward, to confront the parts of yourself you have been unwilling to claim. And often this confrontation is most intense when the relationship collapses for in the ashes. The God image must either be reclaimed or lost forever. I have seen this many times. Someone lets the figure back in, only to experience once more the wound that began the whole cycle. And yet, instead of seeing it as a repetition, they finally recognize the mirror. They see the same look in the other's eyes that once came from a parent, or the same silence that once froze their voice in childhood. The recognition is electric. In that moment, the spell can break, for the figure outside and the figure inside are seen as one, and when they are one, you can speak to them directly within your own soul, without needing their outer presence to complete the dialogue. Do not think this ends the story at once. The psyche moves in spirals, not straight lines. The figure may return again, in body or in dream, to test the integration, but each time you meet them from your center, the bond shifts. You may even find that you can welcome them without fear, for they no longer have the power to unseat you. You have taken back the anima or animus, embraced the shadow, and stood in the emptiness until it became the fertile dark, and from that dark a new life can emerge, one not bound by the past. There comes a moment, sometimes sudden as lightning, sometimes slow as dawn, when the energy changes. You see them again, the same familiar presence, the same inflection in their voice, the same movements that once triggered a rush of memory and longing, yet something within you is different. It is as if a great wheel inside your psyche has shifted, and the gravitational pull that once drew you toward them no longer commands your steps. This is not detachment born of bitterness or avoidance. It is the quiet authority of one who has retrieved the projection, taken back the God image, and no longer seeks it outside. You look at them and see not the savior, not the destroyer, but the human being, flawed, finite, and free to walk their own path. And you realize you too are free. This is the turning point the alchemist spoke of. When the vessel has endured the heat long enough for the matter inside to transmute, what was once a raw and reactive hunger becomes a distilled clarity. The figure who once carried your anima or animus now stands before you as an equal, no longer magnified by the lens of your unmet longing. There is still warmth, perhaps even love, but it is no longer the desperate love of possession. It is the spacious love that can exist even in absence. The drama has ended, and what remains is presence. But to reach this moment, the psyche demands that you face the full weight of the emptiness that follows release. The final closing of the door is not a gesture of rejection. It is the sealing of a chamber in which the old pattern can no longer feed on your energy. You may feel the echo of their absence, like a phantom limb and the temptation will be to reopen the door just to quiet the ache. Yet it is in resisting that reflex, in sitting with the ache until it reveals its true nature, that the transformation becomes irreversible. The ache, you will see, is not for them, but for the parts of yourself you abandoned in pursuit of them. As you tend to these lost parts, the pull toward the returning figure fades, for its purpose has been fulfilled. In dreams, after such a release, the figure may still appear, but now the tone has shifted. They may be seen at a distance, smiling, walking away down a road you need not follow, or they may appear in a different form entirely, as a guide, a teacher, or even a child. This is the sign that the outer relationship has completed its psychic function and the inner image has been integrated. The once demanding complex has become an ally, a source of insight. Rather than compulsion, you have absorbed the God, and in doing so, you have expanded your own divinity. The mystical meaning of this process is profound. Each person who enters your life in such a charged way is, in truth, a messenger from the self, the archetype of wholeness at the center of the psyche. They arrive in a form that will most effectively awaken the dormant energies within you, even if that awakening begins in pain. To let them back in repeatedly is not a flaw, but an attempt to complete the message. And when the message is finally received, the messenger is released, not cast out in anger, but allowed to return to their own journey. This is the completion of a sacred contract that neither of you consciously signed, but both of you honored in the deepest chambers of the soul. There is an image from mythology that captures this moment, the hero returning from the underworld in countless tales. The descent to the realm of shadows is undertaken to rescue someone. Eurydice, Persephone, a lost child. But often, the one rescued is not brought back to the living world. Rather, it is the hero who is transformed by the journey. The figure you kept letting back in was your Eurydice, your Persephone. In the end, you may not lead them out of the dark, but you emerge carrying the light you found there. This light is yours alone, and it cannot be extinguished by their absence. And so you stand at the threshold for the last time. You place your hand upon the door, not with trembling or urgency, but with the calm of one who knows their own ground. You may bless them silently. You may thank them for the role they played. And then you close the door. There is no slam, no dramatic lock, just the soft sound of wood meeting wood, the stillness that follows, and the quiet knowledge that the cycle is over. Behind you stretches the open road, and within you lives the God you once sought in their eyes. From this point forward, if they appear again in life, in dream, in memory, you will meet them without losing yourself. You will know that they were never the source of your wholeness, only the mirror that revealed where it lay hidden, and you will carry that wholeness into every new encounter, recognizing the archetypal dance without becoming its captive. This is the gift of the work, the treasure wrested from the depths, the ability to love without surrendering your soul, to walk away without leaving yourself behind. And now, as we emerge from the intensity of these depths, the question becomes, how will you live with this knowledge? For it is one thing to see the pattern, to feel the weight of the archetype, to stand in the fire until the gold appears, and quite another to embody this awareness in the quiet corridors of daily life. The psyche is not satisfied with momentary flashes of insight. It longs for integration, for the weaving of that light into the fabric of your being, so that you move differently in the world. Not just in rare moments of heightened consciousness, but in the simple, ordinary encounters that make up the greater part of a life. You will find that the world still presents you with mirrors. Faces will pass by that stir an old familiarity. Words will be spoken that echo the voices of the past. Gestures will awaken memories you thought were laid to rest. These are not failures. They are invitations, opportunities to meet the reflection without losing your own outline. You will feel the flicker of the old pull, the ghost of the urge to step into the script. And in that moment you have a choice, not the compulsive return, nor the rigid rejection, but the third way, the way of conscious engagement, to stand there. I feel the stirrings and remain sovereign in your own center. Integration means that you no longer see the returning figure as an external rescuer or destroyer, but as a living reminder of your own inner work in their presence. You may notice a tenderness that is no longer bound to the hope of being saved. You may feel compassion without the impulse to fix or fuse. This is the subtle alchemy, the capacity to hold the image and the reality in the same gaze without collapsing into either. To love someone as they are, not as you need them to be, is to release them from the chains of your projection. And in doing so, you release yourself. But I must caution you, the unconscious does not retire. Its tides will continue to rise and fall, bringing with them the flotsam and jetsam of old patterns, half-buried de désir, fragments of dreams. You will be tested, not in the dramatic form of the figure pounding on your door, but in the quieter forms of longing, loneliness, or the temptation to compromise your truth for the sake of connection. These moments are sacred in their own way, for they remind you that the work is ongoing. Wholeness is not a static achievement. It is a dynamic relationship with yourself, renewed in each choice you make. And as you live this way, something extraordinary happens. The energy that was once bound up in the endless cycle of return is freed. It begins to flow into other areas of your life, into creativity, into genuine friendships, into a deeper connection with the self. The self, as I have often said, is the organizing principle of the psyche, the source and the goal of individuation. When the projection is reclaimed, when the inner marriage of opposites begins to take root, you find that your life starts to arrange itself around a deeper center. Choices that once felt impossible become clear. Paths that were hidden seem to open of their own accord. The world becomes less a battlefield for your complexes and more a field for your becoming. This is where the mystical and the practical meet. For all the language of gods and archetypes, the true test of transformation is not in visions or symbols, but in how you live tomorrow and the day after that. Will you speak honestly when it matters? Will you remain present when discomfort rises? Will you choose relationships that honor your wholeness rather than feed your fragmentation? These questions are not answered once, they are answered daily in the small, unremarkable acts that over time shape the soul's trajectory. If you can carry this awareness into those moments, if you can remember that every person who enters your life is both themselves and a reflection of something within you, then you will find that the compulsion to let the old figure back in has transformed into the freedom to welcome or decline without fear. You may even encounter them again and find, to your surprise, that you can smile, exchange a few words, and walk away without the door in your heart swinging open. This is not coldness, it is the warmth of one who no longer needs to burn themselves to keep another warm. And so I leave you with this: the one who kept returning was never your enemy, though they may have wounded you, nor were they your savior, though they may have awakened you. They were the form in which your own soul chose to speak to you. You listened, you entered the labyrinth, you faced the shadow, and you returned with a treasure. Now the journey continues, not back into the cycle, but forward into a life where your wholeness is not negotiable, where your love is free, and where the door you once feared to close now opens onto a wider horizon than you ever imagined. Walk it with the quiet confidence of one who has seen their own depths and lived to tell the tale. The pattern is complete, the wheel has turned, and you, at last, are standing in the center of your own life.